use products. So the big question is for starting is...
Is this better?
Yeah.
The big question is, do we need this product? Is it necessary to design it? That's the biggest question. If we solve that, then if we decide to design a product, because sometimes we are approached by companies to design products, and we sometimes decline projects because we don't believe that there is a necessity for that product. I'm lucky enough in my state of where I'm now that I can do that. Sometimes in the past, when I was starting out, I was maybe less fortunate to do that kind of choice because I have to make money, I have to support my family. So, but at this stage, I think it's very important. Then when we do design a product, then we want to have a good understanding of the user, because it's not that I design products to use myself. Yeah, I'm going to use them maybe myself, but I want to have a good understanding who is the user, what's she going to do with that product. It's not for my ego or for my portfolio that I design products. I design products to people who will use them.
So do you see scale differently? Because in India, when you look at scale and talk about scale and usage of material, the idea of scale kind of lends to the fact that you need to be very sensible and smart about how little you can use to scale up to a large application. So with that, I mean, the whole thought of, how do you design for smaller scale to a larger scale, and then the implications of material and process as a consequence.
I sure think that the scale of products of the series, large series that are produced in Europe is not that big anymore. There's still companies that produce a lot of products and just hopefully sell them. I'm more into products now that are more, again, for a user, and also that they have to be, depending on the type of product. This is a product that you can use for several years, that grows on you as a user, but also grows in the use of the product, in the physical appearance of the product, or in the it gets a sort of a patina, the product. As for instance, a company where I work for, they make upholster leather seatings, and all the seatings that they make are handmade. And if you, in 5 years' time, have something that is broken or something, they will fix it also for you. And so it's seating, it's sofas and so on that you use for 20 years or longer. And I think that makes the product more sustainable than just go over and have a cheap sofa that you use for 5 years and then throw it away and never use it again. That's a waste of material for me. Sometimes you have products we also design products that have a long-term, a short-term use, but then you have to adjust the manufacturer and the product choice or the material choice to do that. You can't then use high-end materials for a product that you go throw back in a year's time.
So what I've seen about material, at least over the last few years that I've practiced, is that the fact that sustainability has existed all through, and the consciousness with designers has been there. But what I found is that materials have started becoming smarter. There's a greater sense of intensity of materials doing a lot more to perform a larger, or magnify its implications. For example, you don't use solid materials anymore. It's becoming slivered, sliced to as slim as possible. It's about surface innovation. And it's kind of leading up to the whole idea of hybrid materials, and hybrid materials that can perform based on what you want them to do. And aesthetics is one part, but the idea of being able to transform a certain sensibility of material and then apply it to any application. It could be a ceiling, it could be a wall. So I feel that there's a certain amount of custom-made, at least a future in the custom-made perspective to material.
I think if you mean that materials can be more for a consumer that makes a choice for that kind of material to use that for his likings, I think it's necessary to personalize more products and materials and the way they will be appreciated by the user. Because maybe going back to that is that if you have a product that you like and that you adore, in effect, then you likely don't go to throw it away, and you're going to use it more and oftener, and it will be more sustainable again. But going back to the size, for instance, I'm very lucky to be here. It's the first time in India, so for me, I think I go back home with more questions than answers. So how is it in India? If you produce here, do you still have to make large quantities, or?
So you have both perspectives. I think you've got audiences for both kinds of requirements. I mean, if you look at the whole packaging industry, it's about scale, and it goes down to exactly how much weight of material that you use, the performance that plastic does for you, or any specific material. But I think you also have the other perspective where you can now you can embed technology into materials. You have smart materials that combine flexibility and responsiveness. So it's kind of opening up a very wide range of at least opportunities that industrial design can play with today. It's almost like a palette of things that you can put together. And I would still say that's a small part of what is done in India, but you definitely see the initial sparks of that. Just going back on that, reflecting on the whole comparison of what you come from the whole minimalist sensibility of extracting, so less is more in some way, and therefore kind of the spirit of the product is with as little as you can put into it. Just reflecting on that, I mean, we've seen a move now across globally to something that is more tangible, tactile, natural materials that are coming back completely in high-tech devices as well as surfaces otherwise. And do you see that countering minimalism in some way, or is that something that's really adding to the whole experience of material and design?
Well, minimalistic design is something that was fashionably and still is for some. The products that I design don't scream for attention, because I'm very happy that I have products that I've done 10 years back and still are selling. So I must have done something right there that people still like the products. I don't like minimalism as a trend that is just shaping down. I think there's a nice term. Actually, it's not minimalism, it's maximizing the possibility of a product, maximizing the use of material. Is that by using less material? Then it's great, but not just design a shape. I don't like to just design a product for a shape. I have products that are not on my portfolio, that nobody will see, that are lighting products that you build into a building. Nobody will ever see that. It's more about the light that will come out of the fixture than about the product, and that's more interesting for me. What is the effect, and what is the end result of the product?
So it's actually something that talks about trying to maximize what you can do with as little as possible, and I think that also reflects the whole thought of awareness towards the resources that we have. This leads me to an example of a granite hill that I passed by the airport in Bangalore, and over the last 20 years I've seen it almost like in animation stretched in time, almost scooped out of the surface. It kind of leads us to this whole worry, because a lot of these problems don't affect us directly, but as professionals we have the power of choices, and we are able to make those choices now for design, and especially for India, where scale is an important part but costs are also as important. And this whole essence of being able to get designers aware that your choice makes a huge difference to everybody's lives, and therefore think sensibly about material, think sensibly about everything that you put together. That's such an early stage. And I think that's an important part to this whole aspect of material. So I just wanted to kind of end with one more question to you on a broad perspective of how do you use sustainability in design, in product design? How do you kind of connect those two?
Well, first of all, I wanted to come back to you about the user, and I think the most awarding thing as a designer is that people use your products, that people are going to the shop and spend their hard-earned money on your product and choose your product. That's the biggest award for as you have done your job. Not your awards, not getting an award for your product, but people using your product. And for me, sustainability is something that it's a million-dollar question. If I had the answer, that would be great. But it is about each time looking at all the different perspectives to get to the product. For instance, there are a lot of companies in Belgium that want to produce, that have produced in China for the past 10, 20 years. If it's not necessary, why go over there? Why do all the transportation just to make it cheaper? I still believe, and I'm a big believer in making products that last, that have a life, and that you can pass on. That was, for me, the most sustainable way to design a product and not make the next product that... sorry, the time is actually up, but I think I want one thing I want to say is, if you look at some technologically different companies like Sony, who will bring out every half a year a new camera that does better than the last camera, and that will give you the idea that you want to have the latest and greatest and want to have the new camera, and the other camera is perfectly working but is half a year old, and you can't throw it away. That's no point. Then you have another company, Fujifilm, who makes cameras, and they even nowadays do updates of their software of the camera, that you can use a camera that you bought 6 years ago, and is a twice or 3 times better camera than the day you bought it. That's, for me, more sustainable.
Okay, thanks so much. We have 6 speakers after this, and each of them give a different perspective to the idea of sustainability in material design. And we start off with Satish Gokhale. He is the founder of Design Directions and has several awards, international, national, and he's kind of really pioneered the whole space of process and material innovation, and he's got some beautiful examples to share with us.
Hi, good afternoon, and Michael, thank you for this. Michael and Priyanka, I don't know where you are, and thank you ET, and thank you Saint-Gobain. So, I'll get this started. Everybody says plastics is bad, but if you use it sensibly, it's actually a good material. And what we do is, for example, these are planters made from a material where we don't waste a single gram in the production. So that's when I'm talking about sensibility. Each of these are handcrafted initially, and then we make aluminum molds. So, the same product becomes illuminated. So it becomes your night lamp, and it's just 3 watts. So that's how you're consuming and saving energy as well. And they look beautiful. Do I have a clicker in case I need to move fast? So as a company, we do a lot of work in material science. There's more of love and passion. We do something radically different otherwise. So the same material, which is extremely lightweight, we've actually done a test with an elephant standing on this product. It weighs only 12 kilos. And The beauty of this is we've actually invented a process, and part of the process is we've actually worked on a nanotechnology where nothing sticks to this material. So cleaning becomes extremely easy. And also we don't need to paint the products. So these are our rocks for either you can sit on it or use it as a table, weighs only 7 kilos. Extremely easy to move around. The same, we also have them illuminated. But the minute we're using it in an external or outdoor space, we actually fill it with concrete and make it about 40, 45 kilos so people don't steal a 7-kilo rock. This is an interesting lamp which we designed. All lamps are otherwise very boring, straight. So we decided that, this is based on the world's largest legume, and it's from a forest in Maharashtra called the Bhimashankar. The seeds or the pods inside can even germinate after 100 years. So normally we talk about the fruit. Let's talk about the seed also. So this is how it looks, indoors, outdoors, illuminated, non-illuminated. And this too takes 4 watts of power. Okay, so this is an extremely interesting project. I would say officially this is the world's first wall-mounted solar cooker. You can actually become a gourmet chef because nothing can go wrong with it. It doesn't overcook your food ever. I make my mutton or chicken biryani in less than 2.5 hours beautifully. Normally all solar cookers used to be metal boxes and you require a terrace, whereas this you open just your sliding window or your balcony and put your container inside. This is again, we do a lot of work with a company called Tetra Pak. They were howled by the ministry 20 years back when they launched the product, saying that you have to incinerate to destroy your product after the consumer uses the Tetra Paks. Oh, I don't know why it's gone ahead first. It's not 20 seconds. Okay, sorry. How do we tweak processes? Both the products are made on the same machine. It's paper mache. Your egg trays, the slippers which are disposable do not absorb water, whereas the placemat outside your shower still actually absorbs water. So you just tweak the process. That's how the invention actually happens in process. You saw the earlier planters. The same planter now is made from Tetra Pak waste. So what we do is we hydropulp the Tetra Pak shredded material, remove the paper. So when you're eating at McDonald's, the tissue is made from the Tetra Pak paper which we hydropulp, and we pulverize it and make it into a rotationally molded part. So we're using 75% of the Tetra Pak. This is what our board looks like. It's a beautiful material developed 20 years back. Each and every auto rickshaw of Bajaj, they use this material for seats. The same we now convert into all our machines or all our products now, instead of plywood, are packed on this material. And when it is received by the customers, they actually convert that into beautiful furniture pieces. So we've also put in a place to collect the Tetra Paks, the post-consumer waste, and people have been making good products out of it. These are all outdoor applications, incidentally. That material which you saw, we actually built more than 5,000 houses after the Gujarat earthquake, and the houses are still in place. Okay, this is an interesting product. All your demonetized currency is converted into beautiful 8 by 4 feet boards, and now it's been used for furniture. So all done on CNC machines, and it's really an expensive material. On the lighter side, we also made some coffins. There were a lot of deaths after demonetization. Okay. I love to eat chemical-free vegetables, so we invented a system. It's called Grow Easy. I'm calling this smart because this works like a carburetor. It gives a rich mixture of air and moisture. And what you're seeing, this is my spinach on the 28th day as opposed to 45 days. And typically all gated communities have the security guys who are actually farmers in disguise. Give them the right job, let them sell, let them actually educate the people staying in that community. All these materials, whatever I've shown you, are 100% environmentally free and recyclable, 100%. And these are made from linear low density polyethylenes, which are actually cheaper than polypropylenes. So if I just take the case of the planter which I just shared, the Grow Easy planter, a polypropylene gamla or a planter would not last beyond 2.5 years. We can give a guarantee of 20 years for this product. Thank you.
Thanks, Sachin. Can you hear me? The one thing that really comes out of this whole presentation of Satish is that there's a great interconnectedness between process, innovation, and material. And I think that's a great reference point for us to relook at traditional manufacturing practices and see how we can kind of build up from there. The next person to speak is Gayatri. And Gayatri is from GNA. She co-founded GNA with Namit and herself, and has several awards, 27 to number them, in a range of fields: architecture, interior design, across a whole range of disciplines. And GNA's work and its aesthetic approach is about an amalgamation of being rooted in traditions, and of course that caters for contemporary sensibilities. So it kind of has a seamless blend of comfort, luxury, and utility. So Gayatri, for you.
Good afternoon. When we first talked about materials for sustainable architecture, I think, though we talked, Michael talked about 10 minutes. Though we talked about 10 minutes, we realized that, this can go on for days together. So what I thought we would do is just share some slides of various projects across the world and see how we can open our minds to different things that have been done very innovatively and with a curious bend of mind. I think that's what is required, because in the last 50 to 75 years, I think we have, I wouldn't say aped anyone, but just generally gone by habit of, doing the typical brick, concrete, finishes that have just gone on forever. So this industry of ours, I think, really needs to be shaken up. All of us as architects really need to look at things a little more closely. So I'm going to begin with a small video, which is just a 1-minute thing. Volume, please.
Similar to human skin. And by doing so can be much more dynamic, responsive, and differentiated depending on where it is. And this gets me back to my research. What I propose first doing is looking at a different material palette to do that. I currently work with smart materials and a smart thermal bimetal. First of all, I guess we call it smart because it requires no controls and it requires no energy, and that's a very big deal for architecture. What it is a lamination of two different metals together. You can see that here by the different reflection on the side. And because it has two different coefficients of expansion, when heated, one side will expand faster than the other and result in a curling action. So in early prototypes, I built these surfaces to try to see how the curl would react to temperature and possibly allow air to ventilate.
So just a little snippet as to what Doris Kim Sung has been working on. Some of this work that she's done, shows in these installations over here where she has worked with metals. And this, of course, really translates into, ventilation and shading devices for buildings in a large way. So taking a simple idea and really turning it on its head, looking at how, you can work things out without really getting into, too much of high tech. This really comes, you know, with a constant of low tech, as well as, you know, I mean, areas where you can work with simplified materials. If you see this, there are, you know, spaces over here which are ventilating, and of course, you know, according to the sun, you know, the material moves in such a way that you get more light and ventilation. So that's on one side. On the other side, I think, you know, we have such a palette of traditional material that we've used through centuries. And I feel that as architects and designers, we really have not really looked at where these materials can be used. We have bamboo, we have, you know, paper, which has been done by Shigeru Ban in a great way. So the idea is that, can we really look at all of this? Here we have, you know, projects done with rammed earth, and of course, Anupama Kundu's, you know, design itself, which kind of works with, you know, a sustainable kind of architecture. So the idea is that, can we relook? Can we look at, you know, rather than look at systems where we are trying to, you know, look at measurable numbers and try and bring that down, can we really look at, you know, traditional material in a different way? So of course there are, you know, the ideas of using terraces and, you know, landscape, of course, has again been, you know, I mean, done in a great way. But can it be done in a simple way where, you know, your terraces itself reduce that heating which is reflected into, you know, surfaces, building surfaces, which also becomes, you know, an easy way of doing things. The idea of the veranda that has been, you know, taken vertical over here, of course, by Charles Corrier's building, really brings in again, you know, ventilation, which, you know, and light, of course, in a very, very different way. I think, you know, perforated walls really have not really been used as much as we should be. There are various examples of this across the world. We have, you know, surfaces which are, I mean, people are experimenting from, you know, right from just absolutely perforated surfaces to kind of cool buildings, to areas where there is, you know, an positioning of finishing material, positioning of, say, the brick, positioning of, you know, the outer cladding or the skin, which really then brings in, you know, wind, it brings in light, it gives you privacy. So these are areas where I think with just a little extra thought, we could really look at being more sustainable without going too high tech. Of course, the use of louvers, the use of, you know, the quality of light that it brings in, you know, again, with sustainable material is something that, you know, is very welcome. Automated louvers have been used, you know, in a country like ours, where cost is still something that we have to keep track of continuously, slowly getting there, but at the same time, you know, I mean, to kind of look at all our buildings which have, you know, multi-story buildings with glazing, and to be able to kind of keep the advent of, you know, the glare and sunlight coming in is something that we still, I feel, need to work on. Of course, again, examples of skin to protect glazing. While researching, this was an interesting, you know, kind of concept, I thought, which was where water or a, you know, hydromembrane was used. In this particular case, there is actually, you know, system where water itself, you know, evaporates and cools the surface. So again, this is a skin, and again, it is, of course, in more in a research situation. Last year when we, not last year, 2 years ago when we were at the Biennale, we saw that there was umpteen number of materials that were being used, that were being shown or researched on, which were in the biology or the botany sphere, where people are looking at various ways of using organic material, using bacteria to build on blocks. So just to end, I just wanted to say that we have spoken, we have as a practice worked on a net zero building, which is the Jacquard Corporate Office. We have worked with KEF, which is the system where you have modular precast building material that comes in. But I think the most, the most challenging for me as architects, for us, I feel, and as project managers, is the idea of zero waste. Is there a possibility where we can actually think of keeping our sites, as a zero waste site? I think that's something that we can look at. Thank you.
Thanks, Gayatri. I think the message there that stands out is about, can you hear me? Thanks, Gayatri. The one message that comes out to me on that is that the whole material can have intelligence. Each material has intelligence that's inherent in it, and somehow we don't completely utilize its capabilities. And I think the examples that Gayatri had illustrated are definitely examples of how intelligence embedded in materials, whether it's natural, traditional, or modern, can really transform spaces, architectural buildings, functionalities within itself. So we have Poonam come in next. Poonam has received several Green Initiative Awards, including the Green Dot and the Social Entrepreneur of the Year Award from the World Economic Forum 2016. Now she works out of the first waste shop of the world, and the only retail outlet that informs consumers on how to buy and why to buy, and show them the end of cycle of effects of the choices that they make as products. Poonam.
This is forward, yeah. So this is my everyday material. All of you see this in the papers these days. If you mix it up, it's poison, and it gets mixed up all the time. In Delhi, it's newspapers' front page. The nice thing about it is, while it's downstream, and it seems like it's useless, it can actually, if kept separate, have a lot of use. 60% of it is organic. And if you look around, I'm appalled that in our cities, in our public spaces, in our schools, offices, homes, we have not been able to yet construct pipelines which keep these materials, give them new life, make them not poison, make them nutrition. We don't have it. Look around us. So what I do is, I run a company called Daily Dump. And what I promise to urban Indians is, you take your organic waste every day, you eat, right? You produce organic waste, you keep that at home, and you can convert it into very rich compost in these beautiful products. And you become very good people. Now, how many of you are wonderful people in this room? Wow, 3, 4, 5. Great. So we say you become a better person. But the interesting thing is, 12 years ago when I started, nobody was willing to give me a single naya paisa for this product. And what was worse, they weren't willing to pay for what was created out of this product, which is really wonderful material. Today, we have evidence, hard evidence to prove that compost is the critical catalyst that gets soil supercharged to lock carbon into itself. So compost alone can reduce climate change. And that is the power that each of us has, a city has. So I'm going to just quickly share with you a story on how, for 12 years, my job has just been this. How am I going to build the value in this material? Because nobody has value for it. So I started with decentralization. I said at that time, 12 years ago, mind you, all municipalities were talking about centralized systems. And lots of speakers before me have talked about this thing about participation, about how we can leapfrog. So at that time I said, no, it's not enough for me to know that this material is good. It's not enough for the agriculturists to know. It's not enough for the farmers to know. It's very important that all of us know. And how can we get all of us to know this? We can get it only if all of us do it. And how does everybody do it? They have to start at home. How can I get them to understand this is valuable? So I said, all right, it has to be decentralized. We have to go to every home. So what are the choices? Nobody wants to pay. The other thing is India copies. So I said, okay, these two things are going to work in my favor. I have to design in that manner. So we designed this product made by Potter Communities, looks Indian. It's a very simple thing. It can be copied. And just by taking that action, see where all it appears. We find it pops up in very, very many places. The latest is on the right-hand side. It popped up at the latest Green Council, or they had a huge fair in Indore. All the municipalities and all the municipalities of the SAARC countries came. And the Indore commissioner actually had it built and put up there. On the left, there's a guy in Delhi who's copied it and given it its own name. The white product is from a German who came to India, used our product, went back to Germany. So the point is, when you want to look after a material, and we want to look after our soil, we want to look after our water, we want to look after our air, it's not enough to say that material is in isolation. We also have to think about how we think about that material. How do we participate with that material? I'll tell you another small story. We have a product that is a larger product that communities use. I'm having hell of a time. I'm sitting on stockpiles of 40 tons of done compost, which we pick up from these communities. Because it's very difficult to reach to farmers. The cost is prohibitive. And we're trying to find ways and saying, okay, how can a city actually start thinking about these things differently? So we've crowdfunded, we've done all kinds of things, but we still haven't found a solution. But these are the challenges. If you want your city to be sustainable, we're not talking about only gated communities or buildings. We're talking about the entire city as a throbbing entity. And people come to me when they see this product and say, we'll give you the smart aspect is going to be an app where you can figure out when your person comes to that place and picks up the compost. I said, that's not smart. If you want smart means telling me how much I've saved. How much have I saved for the city? And so we are trying to work on this kind of tech-based thing for that particular product. But nobody really wants it right now. The city doesn't want it because finally the communities that keep that organic waste out of landfill should get less property tax. They shouldn't be paying so much property tax. This is another example of how you can do very, very simple intervention, but get people excited to copy and own. We designed this again about 10 years ago. Basically, what does it do? You want lots of trees, right? You like shade. Trees are nice things to have in cities, but they have leaf litter. And leaf litter is a nuisance. Well, I don't think it's a nuisance, but people say it's a nuisance. So you put it here, water it, and it becomes wonderful material. But no. People don't want to do that. So once we designed a simple thing like that, again, it got viral. Other people started copying it, which is the point. If you are saying we have to look at materials differently, you also have to enable people's participation with looking after that material differently. This is another fun project we did with kids. People urinate on pillars. So we got kids to talk and think about this idea of what is urine, what can you do with it. And we tried, the kids actually did this, they built a leaf composter urinal under the flyover with the participation of the bus drivers. Does it work? No, it needs, of course, a lot of work. But it's an idea. And then I asked, please understand, this is the critical part. I asked all the kids. I said, all right, you enjoyed this? They said, yes. I said, okay, now just imagine if a city had to say, we look after our leaves, and we made many of these leaf urinals all over the city, will you look after it? I said, okay, you won't because you think it's not your job. Because you want to go to Harvard. And this is not your job. I said, then let's cut out all education. Because we can't look after our materials. Nobody wants to look after soil, water. It's boring. We want to be educated. And so then it started a conversation. Is it going to change them? I don't think so, but conversation started. So then I keep asking architects, why are you building walls? Build those barriers or those whatever you call them. Do the function of the wall, but please store leaves or store them because nobody wants to look after leaves. And a city needs leaves. So we do things like this, this is what our company does. We try and get people to have conversations. We think of fun things, small things, big things. But at the end, we got the kids to do this also. This guy was putting all his waste. We got them to go, talk to them, and create all-purpose citrus enzyme cleaner. So kids are our ways of figuring out, unless we have conversations with everybody about materials, people are not going to change their behavior to materials. And I believe also, I'm just running through this, just to show how we get kids to live in concrete jungles. We don't give them an opportunity to work with concrete. They don't know the material. They don't know what it means to build with nature and without nature. We got them to do both. And finally, we reach a stage when we ask them the question, what is more important, technology or nature? And it was a 3-month project we did with them. And at the end of it, they said, we don't know. And I think that is the critical thing. I think it's not an or issue, it's an also issue. We need both. But we also have to have conversations around our materials. Because if we don't have those conversations, if we feel we are the experts, we won't get 1.5 billion people to participate in not making the mistakes the first world made with materials. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Poonam. That was humbling. The idea of giving the common person the chance to make change with sustainable solutions, I think, is the biggest foundation here. And that itself can make a great amount of transformation, whether it's copying or whether it's adapting. It's a good way to propagate ideas in India. And open source design solutions, for sure, I think if we don't worry about the patents that we have and then start looking at how we can propagate things, that itself could make a huge amount of transformation. We have Trupti Doshi, Principal Architect of Aroma Group. And Trupti is an architect specializing in ecological design. She has about 15 years of experience and in a whole range of architecture and design using appropriate materials, building technologies, and rainwater harvesting, waste management, use of renewables, etc. She's also a TEDx speaker and sees buildings and cities as complex living organisms and which are part of a larger cyclic loop of nature. So Trupti will be next.
instead of presenting 5 different materials from 5 different projects, I just thought I'll tell you a story of one material, which I think is the most important material. So this happened a few years ago. Mr. Poddar, who is a highly successful managing director of a large education initiative in Pondicherry, Auroville, approached me for the design of his educational institutional project, which he wanted to build on a 5-acre land. And he wanted it to be a landmark project. And landmark not in terms of cosmetic luxury, but a genuine systemic thinking and sustainable design. And about the same time when I was having the conversation with this client, at home I was reading this poetry by Poetry Aurobindo, in which he had written this very cryptic and mesmerizing line where he said, all our earth starts from mud and ends in sky. So I'm sure many of us would have experienced that two divergent things come to us which are seemingly unrelated, but sometimes one has the answer to the other. So whilst I was doing this project, I decided to use this line as the main inspiration behind the project. So the material obviously was going to be earth. And it is very difficult to talk about material without connecting it with design and technology. In order to make it completely sustainable and bring down the carbon footprint to as minimal as possible during the building phase of the project, we excavated this little pit, which was at the lowest contour of the site, and the soil that came out of that pit, we built the entire 5-acre complex out of it. The walls, the columns, the roof, everything. By building compressed stabilized earth blocks stabilized with 5% cement. Even the foundations, we neatly dug the pits, excavated the soil, sieved it, mixed again a pinch of cement, and rammed it back layer by layer into those very pits. So can you imagine the carbon footprint of this? You have not transported any material. 95% of your material has come from the very site on which the building stands. So the embodied energy of this, it's difficult to read, but is 1/10 of the embodied energy of had it been a conventional building built with normal fired brick or concrete. In terms of design, the application of design is in order to reduce the carbon footprint during the operational stage of the building. So how can we do that if we do not use passive design? This is the psychrometric chart of Pondicherry, Chennai. And as you can see, the 8,760 hours that we have in the year, more than 96% of those hours are outside our comfort zone. And in this kind of a challenging environment, we do not want to use air conditioning because air conditioning is the major cost of the carbon footprint during the operational phase of the building. So how do we design something where we maximize this rectangle in order to at least include 8 months of the year without using air conditioning? So lots of passive features have been used here. The biggest one, the first one being of obviously orientation. How do we orient buildings such that they minimize the incident heat into the building and minimize solar gain? So by having the longer sides facing north and south, by having the pillars funnel the breeze into the building by orienting them such that they are perpendicular to the direction of the summer breeze, because here we need the breeze in summer. Use of stack effect, where the hot air rises to the top and it is removed from these skylights. And the air at the lower level which enters is cooled by the use of green cover outside of the building. Use of water body, inside and outside. Use of cavity walls, vertical gardens, roof gardens, heat reflecting paint, and of course materials. So when we were sieving the soil for making the bricks, all the pebbles that came out, we made all the floors with the pebbles. And this is a variant of the Kerala floor, which uses coconut fiber with lime, hibiscus flowers, and kajal. So they were extremely cool floors built completely with local materials. And people don't want to get up from these floors because it is so cool. The only active strategy of thermal comfort that I have used in this building is structure cooling. And this involves the use of the harvested rainwater that comes from this very roof. So we bring it down from these pipes and store it in a sump. And from there we have a very small pump which pumps this water, and it runs in this bed of pipe below the floor at a very, very slow pace. And water, as we all know, has the capacity to hold twice the amount of heat as the same volume of masonry. So instead of pumping heat out of the space with the use of air, we are draining heat out of the space with the use of water. Because air itself is actually an insulator. And how can you use an insulator to produce cooling? I mean, that itself is a paradox. In effect, with all these 12 passive and 1 active strategy put together, the entire building acts like an earthen pot, which we all have drunk water from. You can even see small water droplets on the surface of the walls when you go there in the morning, and as the sun rises and as the water keeps evaporating, similarly to the sweat on our skin, that it evaporates and it causes thermal comfort. That is exactly how it happens over here. So it could be extremely hot and sweaty outside, 40 degrees, 80% relative humidity. As soon as you walk inside the building, the breeze starts blowing in your face. No air conditioners for sure, but not even fans throughout the year. So this has created the lowest carbon footprint possible even during the operational phase of the building with the use of these principles. In terms of technology, I had to do something which demonstrates zero waste, as Gayatri mentioned before, and also as Alan mentioned, about how can we maximize the use of material? How can we do more with less? So we had this gigantic span between these two Springer beams, and I had to span this entire space, which was about 35 feet, without, of course, using columns, but also without using steel and concrete. So we designed the system being inspired by Antonio Gaudi's way of designing arches and vaults. So he had this brilliant principle where the intelligence of the material, the earth, is compression. Earth is a material which acts only in compression. And how can you make earth span a roof? Because for spanning, you need tensile force. So he had this absolutely interesting way of making a material in compression act in compression but yet span the space. So this is actually the inverted of the Sagrada Familia arch. So he is making this particular shape act as a catenary. So a catenary is a freely suspended chain and acts in pure tension. So by making that material act as a catenary, he's actually making use of the property of the material but enhancing it and optimizing the usage of the material. So just these few lines actually have taken me 3 months to draw. Under ordinary circumstances, if I were to design a conventional roof over such a large span, the thickness of that roof would have been equal to my height. It would have been more than 5 feet thick going from one roof beam to the other roof beam. And instead of that 5 feet thick roof, we've made it come down to a mere 4 inches. at the keystone. We brought down 5 feet to only 4 inches, and this is the way we did it. So I've actually calculated the forces that are going inside the arch, that the line of force inside the arch, and designed every brick that is used in the arch such that the line of force passes from this brick to the center of gravity of this brick, and so on. So by precise calculations and manufacturing the bricks on site to a precision of 0.5 millimeter, we were able to achieve the entire span by using, as I said, a fraction of the material as compared to what it would have been. Just to give an idea, the normal arch would have taken me 10,000 bags of cement. So just have a guess how many bags of cement I had to use in making this. Also, the mortar that was used in binding these compressed earth blocks together was earth. There was again only 5% cement in that. Only 1 mm of mortar was used, and that too it was only earth. So here you see that these bricks are thicker at the bottom, and it keeps becoming thinner and thinner as it goes to the top. And this is only 4 inches. So this is a segmental arch behaving like a catenary, the way Gaudi made it behave like a catenary. And the beauty of this is that unlike any other roof, there is absolutely no formwork underneath. It is a complete zero waste building. There is no shuttering, as you see. The 2 masons are working at 2 ends. So this mason is working at this arch, and this mason is working at this arch, and they two just come together and meet in the center. The arches are literally defying gravity and flying out of themselves. The heaviest material, earth, is actually flying out of itself without any support underneath it. And these string lines that you see, they are only serving as guides above. They are not below it. So instead of 10,000 bags of cement, any guesses? 33 bags of cement for that entire gigantic space which houses more than 500 people. So through innovation and absolute cutting-edge technology, we were able to create a highly engineered building out of perhaps the oldest material, which is actually the most timeless material, earth. And these principles of, and yes, this is the toolbox to create such a highly engineered building, precise to 0.5 millimeter. So we apply these principles of material design and technology to achieve minimum carbon footprint during the build stage through minimum embodied energy, minimum carbon footprint during the operational phase by doing buildings which are thermally comfortable through passive design, as well as to achieve zero waste through the form of technology in all our projects. This building was selected by the United Nations Environment Program as a model for sustainable development in India. So my client, Mr. Poddar, got his landmark project, and I had the privilege of translating poetry into architecture, of transforming earth into sky. Thank you.
Thanks, Trupti. Message here, I think again, the whole idea of a very, very simple, basic, primitive material, and then bringing alive a great amount of intelligence with the way you construct and use it. Smart, localized solutions, and I think it really opens up a platform for greater contextual and localized design, possibly reducing the amount of commoditization that we see in practices that cut across regions in the country. We have Ashish Jowhari and Yogesh Tantia from DSP, Associate Board Directors. DSP has a 30-year history and has led to a whole range of projects that have created global recognition for them. DSP has expertise in master planning, building service, design services and interior design, and has a footprint in about 10 countries. Over to you.
Hi, good afternoon everybody. My name is Ashish and my colleague here Yogesh. May I first request, we are in a green conference and I'm freezing. So I don't know if the temperature can be tweaked a little bit, if everybody feels the same, because we're using too much energy to cool this place right now. Right. All right, over to Yogesh to start the introduction of, we are using a topic called glass today in architecture. Yogesh.
Okay, we said that the fact that we're talking about glass, it is also important to understand how did glass evolve over a period of time and how are we using it today. So yes, glass started being used in the construction industry purely because of the invention of lead glass, which allowed us to use glass for bigger openings. We went from glass to the industrial period where the need of the hour allowed people to use glass in a bigger scale. And then started a time where glass were used to span bigger spaces, came into construction of Crystal Palace as early as 1851. And coming down to all the way to 1957, where we started to have skyscrapers all in glass. So the glass saw its journey starting from 1800 to 1957, 150 years. And I think after that, we have spent another 70, 80 years in trying to see how do we use glass. So we said, why glass? Do we understand the material really in a good way, and are we using it in the right way? So we said that one character which comes out very strongly for glass is transparency. So someone having, a client having a space like the map below, and just those two dots are what he wants to build because the site is in such a marvelous location. So all he wanted was a visual eagerness to see the space, and hence glass came as a material which allowed transparency and started to being used widely because of that particular nature of glass. Then we said, what else glass has done? Public spaces have been used. So we said glass became an enabler. So the left hand shows what the open plaza was, and IMPI being asked to deliver an extension to the space. So the left is the space without the pyramid that we see today. And imagine that space being built with something where you cannot see the surrounding, and the built mass overshadows everything that is around. So we felt glass here became an enabler to still put something in that plaza and yet keep the sanctity of plaza intact. Skyscrapers started to come, and here was one building which was more modular in nature, done of a complete grid structure. And glass could be one material which could be used because of the very fact that it was very modular in nature in the way it could be built. It saw its time, and then the boxes started coming out of the Sears Tower, and glass became a chance to give a different experience to people. Sorry. So this is what experience could be created only because of the other property of the glass, which is its strength itself. So the capacity of glass to hold those amount of load was used to give people an experience which was not being able to given to a common man at some point in time. The bottom one being the Apple store, where a glass box is all standing just because of the strength of that material, the load carrying capacity of that material itself. So Mies, when he was doing his glass building, he said people are worried about light and shadow that comes into the building and how that play happens. He said, what does glass as a material bring along? So he said reflection is one thing which is a component of glass, and why don't we worry about that? And 50 years we have been into that scenario, and then here comes this building where the context of the site was so important, where the need was there that there could be a surface where people relate to what the surrounding is all about and how those reflective glass panels help in understanding the mere sight and how they interact with a person coming to experience the performance over here. So that was another character of glass being explored in a completely different way. We said, yes, it's a general approach that glass is not sustainable, but just about how you use glass that becomes more important. And the ability of glass to work with other material, to take other material along with it, is what is more important. So that's the stadium in Taiwan, and then this is the London station, where the cells have come along with the glass, gets the purpose of light coming in, and still works in a more sustainable way. Iconicity is something that a lot of people want it to be presented in a most obvious way, and glass does give you that option of being able to decipher the form that you want to, for the function that you want to put into it. So that character of glass has been explored enough in terms of being able to get that form. Direction, wellness also have been greatly explored by glass. So this is a classic example of a Smiley Center at Toronto, where a prayer hall was done, where the whole roof is actually is made of glass, but only a particular section of glass allows lights to penetrate in the way it is required, which is direction towards Mecca, so based out of Toronto and Northeast. So it gives that control of light that needs to be there in a controlled environment and brings about that spirituality. So that's a shot from outside in the evenings, and that's a rendering of people actually trying to do a prayer and getting a sense of direction and giving us sense of space also. So different needs. So here is somebody who wanted to make sure that nobody forgets the building that they come into or the place that they come into. So glass, when put along with dichroic film, which what it does is it basically allows lights to fall into it and breaks the spectrum of the light. So wherever the film comes, you see it responding to different colors because depending on the direction on which the rays are flowing. This is also an example of a school where they wanted a good amount of light to come in, a church where they wanted light to come in and color to be a part of it. So the glass does give us an opportunity to get that color going into our the buildings. Having said all of that, it is very contextual where you use glass also. So if you have to use glass, it's important to understand how could glass behave in a more sustainable way, where we start using it as not just the main skin and be okay to look at ideas of second skin depending on what function they are trying to behold in the glass itself. So what is more important, what we felt is it's not to look glass in isolation, but what a particular material can do is more important to understand. We also asked to see what glass can be done in high-rise. So we took a couple of examples and we had to show one particular example where we have designed a high-rise glass building in our context and how we try to mitigate the issues which comes when you put glass in a tropical condition.
Sure. Thank you. Right. These are just some of the works that we have recently done, and they're under construction in Bangalore and Mumbai, kind of buildings. I'll quickly come to one project that we have designed about a year and a half ago, and the feedback, the initial feedback that we got from the client was that they were looking for a building which could house about 15,000 people. It could be very energy conscious because this client is really, really conscious about their energy. They run a center which monitors any energy that is being used in their water systems, in their air conditioning, in their electricity system and everything. This is going to be a building which must be futuristic because they were very keen that this company, I'll tell you the name, it's Infosys. So when Mr. Murthy said that, he wants to build a building which is very, very energy conscious, but the global position of Infosys might also be represented by this building. And of course, iconicity, because everybody wants to be seen somewhere, and building, especially tall building, is one way to show, how you stand and where you stand. And it must be very, very innovative. I mean, these were the basics that we were given by them, and we sort of developed the ideas around them primarily. So we decided that, first we decided we'll do one big block of a building. Then, because we were trying not to touch the trees around the site, and there was a very big central area inside. However, when we did some research and started using computer analysis, we realized that if we do that building without touching any trees in the site, we would never be able to do a sustainable building. So we moved away from the idea and got a building which is basically 2 blocks, which are obviously north and south to get maximum light penetration inside. We started to play with the idea how they can put together, so the forms started to come in primarily, and that's how the whole building looked like. The program is there, it's only 5 acres, you have to go tall, 100 meters, 25 stories, and that's how the whole building started to come up. I'll just take you quickly through how we started to design this building. We wanted to understand how a building itself can self-shade, not all, but part of that, number one. Secondly, can we design a whole building in glass and still make it very, very, how do I say, conscious about the energy that we use? So instead of talking about just, it is very conscious and otherwise, we thought, let's give it a number. So when we asked them what kind of energy your buildings are using, their answer was that we are using about 75 kilowatt, per meter square per annum. And when we did a research, we realized that they have really done quite well as compared to the industry standard, which is using more than 100, as a number. And what we said is, we put all consultants together, and we said that we will also look at it embodied energy, the energy that they're going to use in their running of the systems, and we put a target of about 70, to bring it from 75 to 70. And we were very happy when the calculations were done that we were achieving something like 68 for this, and still a glass building completely. So what we did is, we used a computer analysis to understand how much sun is actually falling on which facade of the building. Obviously, since the building is not just a box, it is twisted as it goes up, it tilts a little bit on the other side. So we had to find out a way how to take the whole facade of the building, open it up to understand how much sun is falling on what area of the building. And this is how the whole answer came about. Obviously, this is a very nice, rosy picture. Somebody has done a pastel, but in reality, it is a little complex than that. I'll quickly take you through that. Before that, we also thought, how can we take, nature as an example, and biomimetics is being used quite a lot these days, right? So we took the structure of the building as the form of the leaf. There were 2 things that we thought we could do with that. One is, it's a natural material, structure like that. Secondly, can we use this material? We were doing some research on the energy that is being, done across the world, and there was one research that we found very interesting. What this gentleman has done is he has used anaerobic material, a natural material, which has chlorophyll inside, and he has just put it across the sunlight. And what it does is, over a period of time, the chlorophyll sort of grows within the material and start to emit oxygen. So we thought this is a great thing to do, and what we decided is that we are going to put this across the building, over the length of the building, and think of, like, the existing campus is only 5, 6, 7 stories. However, since this building is going to be 25 stories, how about thinking of it as these becomes the oxygen-giving trees up in the air primarily. And that's what we went about doing that in this, at least as an idea. I mean, the research is still going on. We hope once we get into the building of it, we can actually use this material. So this was the model of the structure. We were trying not to use any columns in the periphery of the thing. So what we did is, we said we'll do a concrete building and do a steel edge all around in terms of the beams, which will replace the columns. And this will also become the facade of the building. Now quickly, what we did is, that earlier diagram that you saw about the amount of light that is falling on all the faces, we designed simple sunshades, triangular sunshades, which comes out of varying distances from the building, because it had to be built, so we had to modularize the thing, and eventually made panels of modules, of about 6 modules, where the sunshade is at particular distance. Ideally, one of the examples that Gayatri had shown, where the facade opens up and closes out, we wanted to do that. But economics is very important in India, and we must be able to afford the building to build it. So this was our solution to understand how it can be built in the standard cost that this company is building rest of their campuses. But we try to do that, and we try to put it across the whole facade of the building, and that's how the whole building start to look like. And that's the final product. Of course, you can't see those little triangles, but that is how it is. So we try to use all these elements where the facade and the glass and the structure is juxtaposed with each other, as well as find the best way of using sun shading to make it look iconic, as well as reduce the amount of energy that you actually use for this building. That's about it. Thank you very much. Thanks. Sorry, I wrote.
Thanks, Ashish, Yogesh. Glass is one of those unique materials that have an amazing amount of versatility. I mean, you can put and apply principles and processes to it to transform it from transparent to opaque to thermal properties, acoustic, and whole range. So I think it's a great example of a material that is very diverse and has many avatars, and you can do a lot with it in terms of architecture, furniture, building, the entire thing. The last speaker, we have Ajay Gupta, Executive Director of KGD Architecture. Ajay serves as a Director to Healthcare and Commercial Projects at KGD Architecture and alumni of Illinois Institute of Technology. Has experience of over 19 years in handling large-scale work across the globe, India and abroad. And his expertise lie in strategy, feasibility planning, creating efficient, productive designs, and budget coordinations. One of the fields is also hospitals.
How does this work? Sorry, what's up and down? So I think my topic is not as exciting as all my colleagues have actually just discussed. But I thought I will make it much more, not dumber, but much more grassroots to discuss the topic I have. So I try to disconnect my architectural brain, if I can, and make it a very, very pragmatic discussion on the topic. Our topic is drywall or lightweight construction. That's the topic in hand. And it took me effort because I don't even speak English very well. I'm an architect. I draw better than English, right? So I try to not have images. I try to put words to what it means. So I think it'll be not as glamorous, so don't mind it, but I think we'll take it from there. So what is lightweight construction? I think we have to understand it's a relative term. It could be, as you can see, obviously block is lighter than brick, hollow block is lighter than the other block, drywall is lighter than the block. So I think the philosophy is, what is it? What is it doing for us? So that, to understand, is very critical. And then the lightweight construction. I think we are still talking material as a material, and we forget what it's supposed to do for us. We have to analyze what's the purpose. When the purpose is defined, then the performance of the purpose can be defined. And then you can engineer it, and then make a system out of it, and then optimize the system as far as possible. So the idea of a drywall construction or a lightweight construction would be, it's not a material to be used because it's there. The material, why am I building this wall? I need this wall because I need to segregate these two spaces. Why do I need to segregate the two spaces? I need acoustic barrier, I need visual barrier, I need thermal barrier, I need this. If these purposes are defined properly, I think the systems start creating itself. So I said, okay, usually what are the parameters for a system-based construction? I need structural design for it, I need acoustic barrier, I just said, thermal, fire resistance, which I missed last time. If you create a system, the different materials, or let's say the same materials, can be utilized to create the purpose which is different. So like in the small sketch which is there, this is an acoustic wall. The firewall is probably transferring through the studs like that. The high purpose of this wall is to acoustically barrier the two spaces. In other spaces, it could be a fire-rated wall, which doesn't need to be, although the material qualities are same, exact same quality of the material. Someplace it could be just a structural wall. It could be even load-bearing structural wall in light gauge steel and gypsum board. So even the same material, if the purpose is clarified in our line, you can actually start doing that. Being light has its own benefit. That's, I mean, how light helps itself. It's less labor intensive, simple. People move, less people need to move things. Modular. The problem we face is when we go to the materials we talk about today, the smaller the module, the more evolved we have to construct with it. I think your building, which is very, very fascinating, but we don't have the luxury of building that building all the time. In this country especially, we are growing, we are building a large scale of buildings all the time. We need to have a system-based, foolproof systems to do. So modularity helps. When you modularize the components of a building, it starts coming together without your over-involvement. Otherwise, you have to be overly involved to do a small project. That's the reality today, like it or not. Structural design efficiency, lightweight, is obviously efficient. If I have less dead load, it will be actually lighter structural design. I'm going to just actually, I probably ran that itself here. It is actually imperative to do modular building today where the lightweight construction is used. And I'll tell you the reason. We actually had a speaker talk about KEF. We had a speaker talk about robotic construction in our industry today. These are real now. The reality is it becomes, again, I'm using that word too much, a system. A system is what it is needed to build buildings today. This is what I just said. Earthquake has become an issue. We actually now have a new mandate for earthquake also. Especially, we're doing all the healthcare projects. We are actually forcing our clients, actually not even suggesting, we're forcing our clients to do drywall or light gauge construction between the hospital systems. Because during a crisis, hospital has to run within 15 minutes if possible. If there's a large earthquake, ideally hospital should be back in action in 15 minutes if possible. To do that, if you have blockwork partitions, the traditional brickwork partitions, the damage to human and to the building can be immense. Drywall is a very, very forgiving system, or light gauge system is a very forgiving system to come back to reality if you have to fix it. And it doesn't act, you can choose it not to act with the structure of the building. But if you have blockwork, you would have to connect the blockwork to the system. So it's helping come back to reality after a disaster also. Stability, I think we all have talked about it. I just don't like the word sustainable anyhow, because I think we should do sustainable buildings, period. And what is sustainable? You get yourself educated about the material you're using and what this does for you, where it comes from, how do you build with it. If that logic sets well with you, it's a good material. It's very simple like that. I think the idea of sustainability is overkill. The word is overly used, overly enthusiastically exploited. I think if we are architects, we should just do a basic run of a material and use it. It will be a good material to be used for the project. This project, actually today, we are facing renovation retrofitting. Lightweight construction today is becoming a much more important, I'm using healthcare as an example because my probably background is more in healthcare. It's becoming more and more utilized when we do retrofitting for healthcare facilities. We actually do a lot of hospitals. Wet construction causes trouble. It's got infection control issues. It's got other issues. It's got time of construction issues. It's got moving materials during an operation of a hospital issues. So this is helping us actually run this better and better as we do retrofitting and renovation work. So why not lightweight construction? I think we should also analyze that. We as Indians, I'm being very, very probably racist to our own race, we adapt from different places, materials, and start using it very easily. If you walk around any building right now, anywhere in Delhi, Bangalore, anywhere, there are high-end materials used wrong. It could be curtain wall, it could be a nice spider-fitting curtain wall, which is not even installed properly. So I think the workforce to do this should be right. If we don't have the actual workforce to apply that material right, it's much more worse than using a typical construction or typical or traditional construction, I think so. Since it's a smart system, we all say it's smart because it's a system. Choosing the right things for right places is very important. If I build a building like probably 20 years ago, every room in a hotel had a brick wall in the middle. Half a brick, full brick, 8-inch block, 4-inch block, whatever. Now, if you could design and understand the purposes, you could start engineering every partition to that need. So I think the smartness of that system is you need to be intelligent about what you need from that. So I think if you're not, you're going to misuse the system again. You're going to misuse the product again. It's going to be a disaster rather than an asset to you. Future of construction industry, I think I had to end with that as per the mandate. The problem here is how to standardize a building. I design, I'm sure my colleague Ashish, Gayatri, all design, but does the building look like that the way we designed it? It's a big challenge today. It's a serious challenge. Some of the designs we have done, I can't even show it in a portfolio because it didn't get built the way we wanted to. So I think when the system-based construction comes in place, standard products start coming up. You know what you're building is what you're going to get, what you're designing is what you're going to get out at the end of it. I think that's where the future of lightweight is going to be. I know what I'm going to get out of it when I design. Obviously, time and budget, I'd say overkill, I'm saying, but yes, time and budget. You know if it's going to be assembled. I'll just move to the next. When you assemble a building from elements, you know you have more control over the actual time, budget, understanding performance of the building. So lightweight construction is going to go that direction. I'm just using lightweight because that's the topic, but I think it's about making all the building an engineered building and assembly approach to the building. I think a lot of speakers have spoken about that. It's a curtain wall, it's a wall system, it's a window system, it's a door system, and how they come together. Is it engineered properly? When they come together, it's supposed to come together or not? Because I think architecture is about when two materials come together. If they don't come together right, it's half useless anyhow. So it's going to become that. So the future is about assembling a building from components, elements which are pre-engineered, systematically designed for that purpose. I think that's what it is. I think I said all that already. So that's the short of me. I think that's what I think it's going to be. The future of lightweight construction is about making elements, designing the element for a purpose, and using that element with the other element together, how they interact, and building a building. That will give us comfort that what we designed is built. That will give clients and ourselves comfort that what we wanted from the building is going to do what it's supposed to do. If there's a sustainable performance, any other performance the building has to do, it's going to create that. Performance is the key word. It has to perform to the needs of the building. That's what it's going to do. And lightweight construction is one component of the whole thing, but I think that's going to take it to the next level there. Thank you. Did I finish?
Thank you, Ajay. Actually, I want to take the opportunity to thank all the speakers to share their projects, their insights. What I think I take back from it, when I go back to the little small place in Europe called Belgium, where we have small problems, is that I think the things that came back in all the speakers was that you have to look at the problem at that place. It's not because a problem is there that you can have a solution over there. You have to see what's the problem, what can we do in that particular situation, in that particular location. That's something that I'll take back from it. And also make people part of the solution. There's a stupid sentence that is, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And I think making people aware and make them part of the solution, make them owners of the solution, that will also increase the sustainability. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you to all our speakers for sharing your beautiful ideas and so innovative and imaginative. Imagination's going wild, but at the end, as someone had said, so delightful experience throughout. As we express thanks, I would like to invite all our presenters of this segment here, Mr. Alan Monans, Mr. Michael Foley, would like to invite Mr. Satish Gokhale, Ms. Poonam Bir-Kasturi, Ms. Gayatri Shetty, Ms. Trupti Joshi, and Mr. Yogesh Santia, Mr. Ajay Gupta, if you can all come here. And then I would like to request Mr. Mark Essling, the Global Program Director, St. Gobain, United Kingdom and Ireland, to kindly do the honors of bestowing the honor and gratitude and appreciation to our presenters of this segment. That's Mr. Mark Essling, the Global Program Director, St. Gobain, United Kingdom and Ireland, thanking all of them. In fact, each one of them, and it surprises how nature has so much to give it to us, how we see nature, how each one of them have used it. So thank you once again to all of them. And a big hand for them, all of them collectively present with them. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Mr. Essling. And ladies and gentlemen, once again reminding you, you have the feedback forms with you. You're requested to kindly fill in the feedback form. Kindly leave them there itself. Our representatives will be collecting, and at the end of the conference, we are going to be announcing the 10 winners, the 10 lucky winners, as we collect these feedback forms. You're also requested to kindly tweet at hashtag #ETSmartGreen. Continue to please send in your any recommendations, suggestions, as we've been saying, so that to make this conference more smarter and more informative as we later move next year to the 4th session. So this is now going to be the last segment which we have, the policy segment. And in this segment, ladies and gentlemen, we have been speaking that the Government of India has come up with policies which have been really enabling and conducive. But to an extent, how much there are certain challenges which were also discussed. So we are going to be taking it again from our people here, looking into the Smart City program, wherein we have 100 smart cities which are going to be coming up, both Greenfield and the Brownfield, the Real Estate Regulation Act, the RERA Act which is there, and then the Housing for All by 2022. 3 major initiatives which towards urban renewal which the Government of India has taken. And in this section, I would like to first, we'll start again with the advisory dialogue. In fact, it happened to be a advisory trilogue with 3 of our curators, Mr. S. Sridhar, the chairman, IHF, and the former chairman of NHP. He has contributed towards curating this segment. Unfortunately, he's not been able to join us, but we really appreciate the contribution which he has made towards it. Our next curator of this segment is Mr. George Ferguson, the former mayor of Bristol. He's a past president of Royal Institute of British Architects and the first elected mayor of Bristol, UK. And from his Bristol-based architectural practice, Ferguson Mann Architects, he founded the UK-wide group Acanthus in 1986. He was the joint founder of the Academy of Urbanism in 2005. He continues to practice what he preaches as a social entrepreneur and as an urban regenerator. He is going to be joining us through a video chat, so if we can have his video, please. Requesting people there to be seated. Welcome to you.
COP21 in planning for sustainability. And it's something that I feel very passionate about. I think the future of the world and future generations depends on the actions we take now. And I said that I believe governance is vitally important. And I'm not here to teach anybody in India what to do, but what I find in the UK is that we are very centrally governed. I think that's something that we share with India. And I think it's very important that we distribute governance much more to our cities, that we have much stronger city leadership. But central government has to enable that to happen. Directly elected mayors are able to take action. Action for sustainability. And I think the first thing about leadership is vision. We have to have a vision for the future. We have to set targets. A target that I set is that we become carbon zero as a city by 2050. And then everything falls into place within that overall target. So I think it's very important that Indian cities determine what their realistic target is. It has to be ambitious, but it has to be achievable. I think we all learn lessons from each other. I believe very strongly that we steal ideas from each other because we're in this together as a world. I think we learn lessons from the Sustainable Development Goals, and it's very important as cities that we measure our success against those goals with proper metrics. We look at biodiversity within the city. We look at health. Health has got to be the biggest driver. The health of our children, the health of the next generation. And I think that's an easier sell to many people, to many voters, to many electors than it is the environment in itself, because everybody cares about their health. But we all share this huge challenge of climate change. But who are the people who suffer most from the disasters that seem to become increasing frequency? It's often the poorest, the informal areas of our cities. And so it is vitally important that we think about inclusion as part of the policy process, about tackling inequality. I think planning is vitally important. Planning has been a real challenge. If we chase numbers and just chase numbers, we make huge mistakes. All the worst mistakes that have been made in the West, that have been made in the UK, have been the result of chasing numbers. I think we see it happening in China. The Chinese cities, which I pay a lot of attention to with their rapid urbanization, are chasing numbers sometimes at the expense of the quality of life. So balancing quality and quantity has got to be a very important part of policy making. And that comes to regulations. We need the regulations to protect us for safety, for the building codes. You can't create good design by regulation, but nevertheless put good designers along with sets of regulations, and we can make good places. And placemaking to me is vitally important. Placemaking that provides safety and health and security and community and activity within the city. And maybe last of all, the biggest challenge that I faced as a city leader was that of finance. And I think we have to be so much more creative with finance. This comes back to where I started. We're very centrally governed. We beg for finance from central government. Cities should become more self-reliant in terms of being able to provide their own finance, their own taxation, benefit from the right transit. So also, instead of waiting to spend billions on disasters, we should now be investing with resilience bonds, in investing in reducing the likelihood of disasters. We are fortunate enough to be one of the Rockefeller 100 Resilient Cities. We like to share what our learning is in terms of becoming a city that is resilient against both physical and social pressures and disasters. So those are just a few thoughts. And I wish I was with you, not just because it's only 8 degrees and with rain in England, and I know you have beautiful sunshine and warmth in Delhi, but I wish I was with you to exchange a few ideas. But thank you, Priyanka, for organising this conference, inviting me to be part of the team, and I look forward to seeing you all at another time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. Thank you for your ideas. Thank you for giving us a lot of thought for our discussions and deliberations as we take it. And as you said, as we talk about all this development, we need to take care of our planet and our people and have our policies accordingly, where we can take care of or work towards achieving the sustainable development goals and keeping our climate and environment safe and intact. Thank you so very much. So now I would like to invite our third curator, Mr. Hitesh Vaidya, the Country Manager, India, UN Habitat. He has over 20 years of experience in the field of urban management and towards urban governance, capacity building. He was recently also involved with the Ministry of Urban Development and with the World Bank supported capacity building for urban development project. And since the last 2 years, he's actively engaged in rolling out the National Urban Mission in India, particularly the Smart Cities Mission.
Hi, good afternoon. I think the hall has become empty. Earlier was full, and now I see a lot of empty seats. I know, on a lighter note, I just wanted to point out, even though this is the last session of the program, but I think it's one of the most important, because in the earlier session when we heard about technologies, materials, how you align those technologies, how you align those materials into the policy framework. I think that's what makes important. How the urban local bodies will learn these lessons and build the social programs or Government of India programs and schemes. So anyway, before I say that, I just want to thank for inviting me. I was also told that I should restrict time because we are running half an hour or an hour late. So I'll try to zip as much as possible, because we have a line of urban champions who have been working on urban transformation for quite some time, and I think they will be better to discuss with you or share their ideas with you than I speak. But I just want to point out, it's not that India is struggling. Globally, all of us are struggling what type of cities we want to live in. Just now, person, previous speakers talked about building design and how, whether that design, what they build, is actually the design they. And take that same design and say whether the cities which we are building are the cities we want them. And the time which we have, I just want to say globally we have SDGs, we have New Urban Agenda, we have Paris Agreement, we have Sendai Framework, you name it. Globally, we all are discussing. But how this global knowledge comes down to the local body? It's the urban local body at the local level, whether that whole Buddha is giving the gyan and whether there is a recipient over there, the gyan, he can hold that gyan and say, "Nahi, mujhe wo moksha prapt ho gaya," which is not there. That global gyan is there, and there's a huge gap between the global gyan and the actual practices which is happening at the local level. But I just want to point out again, before I bring the key speaker here, that somebody, I think George also pointed out that, we are all talking about smart cities, we are all talking about housings, but some of all the projects, if you really look at it, does not make a good city. A city needs a good governance framework, city needs a good regulatory framework, cities need a good financing frameworks. Just doing a central sponsored programs will not make a city viable and work. The challenge is not to build cities. The challenge is to make cities work and make cities work for all. It has to be inclusive. So the shift is not building cities, but how we can make these cities work for all. I think that's the challenge which we all need to really work for. And therefore, the policy becomes the best guiding tool or a recipe. It has to define the key ingredients which we need to move from business as usual approach to the transformation approach. It's easy to say than done. And in this regard, I'll just say that there's a huge challenge. This whole segment which we will be discussing, we will be talking about these key components: governance, sustainability, inclusion, and finance, and regulation also. Sorry. So I will, going further, I'll just invite the first speaker, Professor O.P. Agarwal. He is not only the renowned urban transformist, but he is also mentor to me. And he was a principal author of National Urban Transport Policy for the country, which was adopted in 2006 and has remained a key document till now. He has written several papers on urban transport policy and governance. And I request Professor O.P. Agarwal to come and talk about governance issues. And I want to also request him if he can talk about what are the key, not ingredients, but also what are the key deterrents, why policies are not coming to practice. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Hitesh. In fact, he's given me a lot of courage, because I was wondering, looking at the presentations on the previous session, talking about governance after that is going to be so boring. But you sort of created that bridge which makes it a little easier for me to get onto it. But before I go further, thanks a lot for inviting me to this. It's been a privilege. So many of these fantastic designs and fantastic initiatives that we heard about in the previous session, the one thing that comes to mind is, if these have to be scaled, if these have to go up and be encompassing everything, our governance systems, regulatory systems need to be friendly to them. If they are not, they'll remain isolated islands of excellence, but without having scaled up. And to that extent, I feel that this session really lends itself to how do we scale these excellent ideas that have come up. Okay, let me move further. Is this one? You see, a city is a space. It's not a sector. Unfortunately, the way we are organized here, you have Most state governments have a department for urban development. You have a department for transport. You have a department for energy. You have a department for housing. But a city encompasses all of this. So we tend to look at cities as a sector, but that's not what it is. A city is a space. So I would say if this is a space, all sectors really need to fit into that space. And how they fit into that space in a well-designed and systematic manner, optimal manner, that is where good planning would happen. Now, we had cities like Chandigarh. I think cities like Chandigarh were designed, whereas cities like Gurgaon have been built. The difference between designing a city and building a city is when you design a city, you make sure that all these different aspects fit in a logical manner. This is where we are probably going wrong, not looking at a proper design before you start building it. Our current governance systems really don't facilitate this kind of an integrated design of a city. They're too fragmented. Frankly, even within individual sectors, there's a lot of fragmentation. And transport, which is one sector I've been familiar with, you'll find metro systems don't talk to bus systems, who don't talk to road systems. Transport systems don't talk to land use planning systems. So a lot of fragmentation even within a sector. A lot of these sectoral inputs at the city level are led by state government departments. So a state transport department will decide what kind of transport system you need within a city. The state water supply department will decide what kind of water systems you need in a city. A state power department will decide what kind of energy systems you need in a city. But these are not decided at a city level. And Mr. George Ferguson mentioned that unless you have local level planning, which is the right optimal structure for any city, this is what you'll have. Keep having state level interventions which are looking at only state plans. Our governance systems at the city level are really focused on approvals. They're not focused on planning. And I think this is what needs to be fixed, and what's the way to do that? To my mind, as was mentioned and as has been talked about in many fora, the ideal is to have an empowered mayor. We seem to have some problems because of this is not taking off. There are a whole lot of issues because of which we're not getting that empowered mayor. But if we're not able to do that, what is it that we can do to at least in the interim, till we get the empowered mayor, function in the right way? The other thing I feel is a systematic program of building capacity. Hitesh mentioned at the global level, at the higher levels, I think even at the national level in India, you have a certain level of knowledge, you have a certain level of understanding of things. But frankly, when you get down to the ground level, at the municipal corporation level, this does not exist. So a massive program of capacity building, to my mind, is extremely important if cities really have to come up the way we want them to come up. And I think to some extent a review of our educational curriculum is called for. Capacity building is not just about training the people who are on the job today, but also making sure that our future pool of manpower that's coming up is properly equipped in the new knowledge that you have. Looking at a contextual research program as part of a capacity building effort, do we have to just keep borrowing ideas from the West? What is right in our context? Do we really know that? What happens in the West, is that really the best thing for us? I think that kind of a contextual research is extremely important. A rich and reliable database, which is open for anyone to use and analyze so that you come with well thought out, analyzed solutions. That's again very, very important. Finally, there is talk about a professional municipal cadre. I think all of these should end up with a professional municipal cadre that we should have at the city level. Now, if we can't have an empowered mayor, what do we do? To my mind, the funding that goes for any sector should not be decided by sector departments, but this should be guided by a city-level plan which is prepared, and funds should go for implementing that plan, rather than allocating funds to a departmental program that has been put in place. I think the JNNURM and the Smart Cities program at the national level are envisaging this. They want a city-level plan to be built and funds to be allocated as per that plan, but at the ground level, that's not what happens. Funds tend to flow much more through departmental programs rather than making sure that that plan is implemented. So this is what I was mentioning about how the flow of funds should happen primarily for implementing a plan which is for that city. That's all I wanted to say on this.
Thank you, sir. I think you have really highlighted the need and equipping our urban local bodies with the tools and capacities so that they can take and start addressing these urban challenges. Because the way we are urbanizing, we all should know that we are running out of time, and a wrong direction, wrong institutional structures. It will be very difficult for us to retrofit, replace, or maybe impossible to change the direction the way we are going. And unless we build those capacities of urban local bodies, we might not be able to envisage the cities what we want or give to our next generation. Our second component, which is on sustainability and inclusiveness, because whatever cities we want to make, they have to be sustainable. Even though sustainability is a cross-cutting thing, and there have been a lot of discussion in the previous thing, how buildings can be sustainable, but how cities can be sustainable. That's the more challenge, because the buildings exist in the space, which he's talked about cities. So how to make cities sustainable and inclusive. And as I told, the shift is not the cities that work, but shift is that cities that work for all. So that major shift has to be addressed. And for that, I don't have better person than Dr. Chavi, who is an elected representative from Village Council of Soda. And I think she should be telling us that how the things which are happening at the ground level should be reflecting at the policy level. The policies should not be made in the ministerial, in the AC rooms, but should have how you connect the aspirations of the city with the policy, and they guide us. And Dr. Chavi Rajwat was successful in bringing transparency into the council office, as well as she's Open Aspen Fellow and Young Global Leader with World Economic Forum, and she co-chaired the World Economic Forum on India in Delhi. Thank you, Dr. Chavi, please.
Namaskar, everybody. We began with somebody in the beginning earlier today stating that we wish we could go back 75 years ago. I would agree, because 75 years ago, if somebody said namaskar, people would respond back. Namaskar, everyone. Thank you very much. Well, as has already been shared, you do have a little background on what I do. I've been a Sarpanch since 2010 in a small village very close to the city of Jaipur. We're only 60 kilometers from the state capital, but in a district that has been declared as a backward district by the government itself. Now, on the topic, when we speak of sustainability and green technology, hot words. Hot words when it comes to urbanism and contemporary design and planning. However, often the techniques and products are not linked together in an integrated strategy, particularly in case of poorest and remote communities. And that is what I see in the village where I am currently the Sarpanch. So when I entered in 2010, not because it was my dream, but it was because of the reservation, the quota system that we had, so reserved seat for women. And my village, a village where my family hails from, was facing huge crisis. They had not seen development for a very long time. 2009 was the worst drought the area had seen, and the challenges were such that not only did we not have water for our cattle, which was dying, but we did not have safe drinking water available to us, as a result of which people had no choice but to drink the contaminated groundwater, which was also extremely saline, which is what I believe has also resulted in a reasonably high percentage of Down syndrome amongst the individuals in the village. The challenges have been many, but what we also realized was that while it's a drought-affected area, there is rainfall. And when we see rainfall, there's no proper water management. And we went a step further, eventually got the groundwater tested, and you can see the results right there. The government lab report clearly states that all groundwater has been declared unsafe, even for the purpose of irrigation. So how do villagers survive in such grave situations? And sadly, the departments who are supposedly responsible for our development were unaware of the groundwater challenge that this area was facing. And while we have various water resources, the quality that was available when it did rain was so bad and is so bad that unfortunately we don't really have ground solutions to fix these. We have open wells, which we depend on, because we can only depend on surface water for both our potable as well as agricultural needs. But these don't get cleaned. However, I think there are solutions available where these can be converted into sustainable water harvesting structures, but unfortunately, I do not come from the background that most of you come from, and we do not therefore have the expertise needed to make these resources function in a better manner. So what did we do? We looked at the largest reservoir that we have that covers an area of 100 acres and decided that we needed to desilt it, because that is what the age-old tradition had been, but had stopped for a span of about 70 to 75 years, because government had its intervention. But when we look at rural development as of today, we are in the 21st century, and yet machinery is prohibited when we speak of rural development, which I think is terribly unfair. Because when we look at urban development, not only is machinery used, but a lot of machinery and equipment and technology is imported to provide the solutions needed for the privileged people like you and I seated in this audience. But what about the larger number that directly affects where you live in urban spaces? And this is something that I feel people tend to forget. And therefore, that planning seems to get restricted. That mapping is done essentially of urban areas, but not of the rural areas, where I feel it is equally important. The beauty as of today is that people participate if they are nudged. You, sir, spoke about the government structure. We're all fully aware, those within India, of the various silos and the challenges that exist out of it. But I feel that when planning is involved, it's also important to get the voice and hear the voices of the community that live in those very spaces. But until that doesn't happen, we will not have that integrated development that we need to see, that our country needs to see when we speak of smart cities. We do need smart villages, and unless and until both doesn't happen, we will not see a smart country. And the solutions, I feel, are really, really simple. The beauty of a village is the fact that the space is small. So if experts like you come in, and this is what our vision had been, my vision was that I would just purely play the role of a facilitator and mobilize those within the village to understand what the projects were and what kind of expertise was coming in, and connect the dots so we could collectively bring in the required integrated development. Because if you look at a village, every aspect needs intervention. What we have been able to work with is with the limited funding and zero expertise that comes our way at the grassroots. What we have done, if I go back to the previous slide, is used our common sense and whatever little know-how and wisdom that exists within the village is what we use to bring in our development. The engineers that are provided to us by the government do not really have the kind of expertise that perhaps many of you fellows sitting here have. They do not have that kind of vision, and even if they do, they're restricted by the guidelines and the limited training that they go through within the government. And as a result, while we do construct roads, if you look at the drainage, this fails its purpose within the first 6 months of being constructed, maximum a year. If you look at the water harvesting structure that was constructed by the government department, this stopped functioning within the first 8 months of being constructed. And that's where I feel a lot of our resources, a lot of the money that most taxpayers are paying to the government for the development of our country does tend to get lost. And therefore, I think that needs to be restructured and looked at. And yes, we do tend to get bogged down by the large population. But I think if we can start by looking at things from smaller spaces, from small villages, and even if it's one village at a time, I think the progress that we collectively will be able to make would be far faster than what we have seen in all these centuries and decades thus far. So what I'm showcasing to you right now is an idea of what my village is, and this is in a village needs intervention. From drainage, sanitation, providing basic amenities, to housing and buildings, yes, there is the Awas Yojana, which has increased from about 35,000, 45,000 rupees per household to now 1,46,000 odd rupees. But where is the expertise? And that's where someone like Trupti can come in, where people can recognize that the materials they used traditionally, which I think worked very well for the environment and the challenges that that local area had, can work in tandem with the kind of technology that exists as of today, the kind of products that exist as of today, and how can we fuse the two to be far more practical, as we saw in your presentation earlier today. Likewise, other aspects, education, as you pointed out, is very, very important, but education not just in the schools. But I feel if experts like you come into the field and bring in the development that we need, not only will we create a better ecosystem within the village, which will also reduce the influx that happens. Now, a village like mine, for example, when I walked in to see the challenges in 2009 and 2010, the thought in my head that I did not share with my village residents was, why the hell are they still in the village and why have they not moved out, given how grave the situations really were? If I were them, I would move out. And therefore, we need to create those ecosystems. We need to get people to recognize what exists, what used to be respected in the past, but as of today, even nature, which most people believe that villagers do respect, unfortunately is getting sprawled into. Now, the reason I'm emphasizing on that is because while in urban spaces we think of high-rise buildings, I'm not saying we should bring that in villages. But given the fact that the land available with us is limited, population is increasing, everybody wants ownership of land. So if I, for example, if I have 4 sons, instead of them hoping to own land separately, why can we not bring in the apartment system so that the four boys that I produce can live on the same piece of land and have that ownership of that apartment as we happen to have in cities. So I think if that can be done in cities, that can also be done in villages. And when we look at the kind of technology that is available today, there are plenty of solutions, both high-tech, expensive, as well as inexpensive. But if we are able to utilize them appropriately, then the kind of sprawl that is happening and the kind of development and the expansion that happens in villages can be worked upon in a far better manner. And I'm sure you will understand and appreciate this far more, because making those changes in cities always becomes difficult, because as you rightfully said, they're not planned. Most of them are just built. But villages provide you a canvas where you can plan, you can map the challenges, and provide the appropriate solutions, provided you take the time to understand what the village is all about, what our challenges and opportunities are, and what and how can we connect the existing technologies and techniques and products to those challenges to create the ecosystem that we need. And this can start with some simple things as pilot projects and can be scaled up. And here again, I'm going to emphasize, because I've noticed in my 8 years of being a sarpanch that people hesitate, thinking it's too large a project. But I don't think so. If not the entire village, I request you to come forward and create that ecosystem of one hamlet or one satellite village at a time, use that as a pilot, and believe you me, the impact that hamlet will have on the other hamlets within the same village is going to be so high that the next village or the next satellite village would want to see that transformation happen and that development happen in their own hamlet and village. And I've seen that. While we've done very, very small projects, which haven't even seen 100% completion, barring maybe construction of toilets. But how have these been constructed? We use the government design, but that sometimes forgets the long-term vision. So while we have soak pits, but nobody's thinking of what is going to happen when these soak pits fill up. And that is what I think is tragic. When support or when plans and ideas come from the government, because they do not seem to have the long-term vision, which I believe experts like you have. So there has to be, I think, some platform that needs to be created where we can have this expertise be involved. And if government is not open to it, then I think we as citizens have a right to come together and make that difference. So I'll just end with that. And sharing here, as Chris, the architect, the landscape architect who's helping me, he's helped me put this together. So we have identified the key principles that I feel need to be worked upon, and I'm sure you can all go through it. It's all about what I've already shared with you. And if we follow these parameters, then I think we can create beautiful spaces, not just in villages, but thereby create smart villages so that the influx onto cities is lesser, thereby making it easier to fulfill that desire of creating smarter cities. Because I do believe if you bring development in a city, but by the time that development, infrastructure development happens, by the time the project sees completion, influx has increased, population has increased, and the stress on the urban space only becomes far more, so much so that that development almost becomes invisible, as we see in almost all of our big cities in the country. So I'll just end with that, and end by sharing with you what my vision and the vision of my village really is. What we envisage is a sustainable integrated development that can inspire many others to come together. That is the villagers, the government, businesses, experts, to adopt and incorporate measures that create positive impacts for rural and semi-rural communities across the country. We aim for a self-supporting, self-sufficient village, in this case Soda, to begin with, that its people can be proud of. And on that note, what I provide to you is a blank canvas to join hands in painting together and creating a better tomorrow for everybody in this country and outside. Thank you.
thank you, Dr. Chavi. I know that we have to wrap up quite fast, but we still have 3 speakers to go. But we'll try our best to close, because all the earlier sessions now we are suffering for that. That's okay. I think she very rightly pointed out 2 things: the need for hand-holding and guidance and expertise at the local level. She also pointed out that we don't only need smart cities, but also need smart villages. I think that's the good takeaway from this session. I think we straightforward move to planning, which is everybody is talking about planning, and we have Mr. Sanjay Prakash, who is commitment to energy conscious architecture and eco-friendly designs. And his name mentioned in the 20th edition of the main reference works in architecture history. And I think he will, we are talking about mixed land use, compact cities. So I'll let him talk about all the cities, how we want to plan our cities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me over. And when I read the brief proposed by the organizers, I saw the real estate act and the smart cities program and housing for all and so on. But these are not really policies, right? One is an act, 2 are programs. And one wonders what this means for the future of Indian cities, because these will have very limited impact if we don't do something from the grassroots up. And so, do I have some way of changing? Yeah, what do I press? So, I believe that the time has come to create a slight difference in the way we look at how we design our spaces. And we have a double-barreled problem right now. We have to eliminate emissions, that is to say be sustainable, and we have to eliminate poverty. And while doing so, create a relevant urban policy at last, because we actually haven't done anything about this for the last 60, 70, 80 years. And I think the time has now finally come where this is going to grab us by our backsides and bite us if we don't do something about it. So there is an advantage that there is no serious policy though. And the advantage of that is, of course, that every government which comes in can create its own little programs and have its own agenda, and it's politically nice, and it spends some money, so some taxpayer money goes here and there. And but remember, there is no safe investment, because in the case where a policy is not clearly defined, which fool would be willing to put down anything in urban infrastructure or rural infrastructure or any kind of infrastructure whatsoever? So that is really where the challenge lies. And we have this famous McKinsey report which talks about the shortage of investment, but really speaking, this is the deeper problem that we're all grappling with. It finally comes down to governance and the will of our society to be able to even make a difference to that level of equity that we need to envisage. A quick background on why this is a problem that we have to solve on our own. This is a short snap of what will happen in 2025. This was made in 2010, so it's a 15-year forward-thinking map. It's pretty much on track by the United Nations population group, whatever that is, I don't remember the name. And what it's basically pointing out is that in 30 years, this new world, centered mostly in China and India, is going to convert 3 billion people to become urban residents. 3 billion is a huge number. We are a globe of 7 billion people. So 3 billion people in 30 years, not in 2025, but in 2035, I believe, will become urbanized from 2005. And this is the same number of people, about 3 billion, that were urbanized in all of Western Europe, US, what we call the developed world today, in the 20th century and in the 19th century. The only difference is that there it took 90 years to make this transition, while this transition is happening as we speak in 30 years, 3 times faster. So none of the programs and policies and methods that we may have used in Western societies for creating good urbanization are going to work, because at 3 times the speed, how do you even run that much faster to be able to invest in infrastructure that, as Chavi also pointed out, there are far more people to cater for even by the time you've finished half a project, you know. So this is what we tend to do, and this is what I'm criticizing, that we are, of course, we are sitting in one of the cities of the global south, and we tend to play the game of catch up with the West. This is what happens. On the left is a picture of a solid waste scheme implemented successfully in somewhere in UK, while on the right is the same scheme implemented rather unsuccessfully in India, because the numbers were just not surveyed. So once people have a full garbage bin and they don't know what to do with the rest of the garbage, they'll start throwing garbage outside, and this is what's happened. And look at this sorry state of affairs. Look at this closer home where I live in Gurgaon. This is the backyard of the so-called Millennium City. The Millennium City is not really a city of skyscrapers and glass towers and so on. It's not Pudong or Singapore. This is what it is. It's a city of cesspools and slums, and these scavenging animals which are actually getting to the solid waste which has no place to go. And by the way, this doesn't even show the flood that we are blessed with every year, which doesn't allow us to use even the roads that exist in this Millennium City. Now, I think the important thing to understand is that the developing world, our world, cannot anymore create an urban infrastructure so that we all are a member of this utopia, this, you know, this kind of suburban, home-owning, car-driving consumer utopia, which is what the 20th century Western world created. We are trying to create it, but we are going to fail very badly because of one reason which I've already given you, which is that we are going 3 times as fast, and so that's one problem. But the other reason is that the resources required for this do not exist and will not exist. And they cannot be deployed without disastrous social and economic consequences or major wars. To take just one resource, the water for this doesn't exist. We are forever working with this 135 liters per capita a day in all our cities and never being able to make anything close to that. So we've revised ourselves downward to 86 liters per capita a day. We still don't talk about recycling because that's a dirty word, and so on and so forth. So these resources, if they don't exist and will not exist, we really need to rethink our cities in our own way, because really our problems are our own. And if we think of them as somebody else's and copy that model, well, you've already seen what that does. So these fundamental changes will meet opposition from existing interests. There are a large number of people who do benefit from the current business as usual. And we will have to have new forms of infrastructure and financing. And these cannot be managed by the market or by public policy alone. It needs urgent exploration. I'm not going to be very negative, even though I will basically say that we need to merge this poverty alleviation agenda and the sustainability transition, see them as a problem which is a coin with 2 sides. So you cannot solve the poverty issue without simultaneously addressing the sustainability agenda. These kind of wicked problems will bite us in the back if we try to solve any one of them first and then take the other one later. We need to really merge these two and think of these as one issue. We need to look at the future of our cities in models and in visuals that will never have been replicated anywhere else in the world. But believe you me, if we succeed, we will create the world's first rapid urban transformation scenario of a kind that will completely leave the developed world behind. And I believe, optimistically at least, that we will succeed. And that is why I guess I come on to forums like this and just try to create that basic change, saying, well, you know, start thinking differently, start thinking that we have to create our own solutions. Otherwise, this is what we are ending up with. So there's a picture on the left, which is a kind of sustainable transport model of urban city where large numbers of people are sharing some amount of diesel, so emissions are low, right? Is this a desirable model on the left? Is the one on the right a desirable model? It's a sustainable method of transport. Large numbers of people using a rickshaw. It's human transport. It's not consuming hydrocarbons. It's not creating emissions. Clearly, both these models are wrong. And therefore, just to end, I'd like to show some of the kind of work that we've been trying to address these kinds of issues, such as on, okay, I'm sorry, this is a different presentation than the one I had really prepared, so I'm sorry about that. What I wanted to say was that what we try to do in our own work is to try to address city and campus problems to have a situation where we can deal with campuses of about 1,000 acres in a way that it can create a reasonably good quality of life while utilizing almost zero resources. And this is not impossible to do, but it is a tough call. And at the same time, we must provide sufficient employment and skills to be able to handle the employment issues as well. And unless we can balance these two, we really have no hope. I am now joining the panel anyway, so I'll be around. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Prakash. I think the way you highlighted the challenges which urban local bodies are facing, I was remembering the Ashrivad or Wo, which Bhisham Pitama says, Ayushman Bhava. So these urban local bodies have that Ayushman Bhava with all the challenges, and they cannot stop the Mahabharata. You know, so that's the person I was remembering. But before going further, I will now, another major component is regulation. Where, which is the most important, how you create those regulatory frameworks at the local level, and how it gives access to different services and makes cities more equal to all. And what can be the better person than Dr. Sanjay Seth, who is a senior director and senior fellow with the Sustainable Habitat Division of the TERI, as well as he's a chief executive officer of GRIA. And one of his major work has been energy conservation building code, and he has been creating enabling frameworks for facilitating implementation of these regulatory frameworks. Dr. Seth, please.
I'm not doctor as yet. Just a small correction, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not doctor as yet. I think probably at the end of this workshop, I may end up getting a degree from Hitesh. But nevertheless, thank you very much for having me here. Mr. Subramaniam, Sengoben, ET, putting this together, congratulations. I think it was a very learning, I mean, the little time that I've spent here, I think I've come more to learn rather than to be kind of making any presentations here. But I wish that, if we could have probably restructured the entire set of presentations that were made, because the presentation that I have again gives you the sense of opportunity that we have in the way we are growing in the urbanization that is taking place, where we are going, and it just gives you a whole lot of perspective as to why it is very important to be going the sustainable path. And in terms of numbers, Sanjay also mentioned about the way the the urbanization is going to take place, how we are going to, and here, Sanjay, I mean, it says 6.3 billion people are going to end up in urban spaces. Yeah, so I mean, it's just, imagine the amount of, and bulk of this is going to be, about 90% of this is going to be in Asia and Africa. So it's a huge opportunity for us to be going correct. And then obviously, because of all of this, the entire focus is on the sustainable urban development. We have the SDG 11, which you all know about. And then, of course, in order to go to that goal, the frameworks that have been set up under the Habitat 3, and then, of course, the recently concluded the World Urban Forum, which was held at Kuala Lumpur recently. The other perspective which I thought which is very important to be mentioning is about the number of mega cities that are going to come up. And here you see by 2030 we see there are about 41 megacities we are talking about. And you know, of these, 7 of them are going to be in India. That's what we've been told, that 7 of them are going to be ending up in India. So it's again the amount of urbanization that is going to take place. Now, much has already been talked about all of this, the urbanization globally, the urbanization which is taking place in India, what we need to do. But you know, in the interest of time, and then of course the various initiatives of the government of India, which I think Sanjay, you very clearly mentioned that what are policies, what are the various frameworks on mission mode, what we are doing. There are a whole lot of them, bunch of them, which are currently under implementation. And then of course, this is something which is really, really, I think, one of the best things that has been put together. They talk about livable cities, which go beyond, you know, beyond the aspects of sustainability. They look at a balanced quality of life. They look at sustainability. They look at economic viability and stability, and then of course effective governance. So all of these, I think, are very, very key to holistic development of a city, of a new city. And then, you know, during my time when we were talking about the Energy Conservation Building Code, when we put together, when I used to work with the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, one of the key challenges that we faced was the implementation, the lack of an implementation framework for its effective rollout. And that is precisely because of the fact that bulk of these initiatives or the regulatory frameworks are created at the center, but it's, you know, the rolling out has to be done at the local level with the urban local bodies. And there, I think you need enough capacities. That is, of course, primarily one of the most important factors. And then tools to evaluate whether these policies are really being effectively rolled out or not. And that is where I think, you know, if you have something which you are able to evaluate as you kind of implement, it'll help you to see whether, you know, if there are any course corrections required or not. So the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs has created this livability indices that have been created. I think that's an important aspect to see where we are going as far as making these cities livable. And, you know, Professor Agarwal, you spoke about a well-planned city. I think I would like to kind of take you straight away to the new capital township of Amravati, which is now being developed as the township for the divided Andhra Pradesh. And here, this is being looked at as a people's capital, where it's not only a top-down, but a bottoms-up as well. And the people's vision has been incorporated into the entire planning process. And they would be also simultaneously boasting of a world-class infrastructure which is being put together. So it's a top-down and bottoms-up. That's what they are doing. And we've set up, TERI has set up a sustainability cell which is guiding them through this entire process of evaluating it as we move along, as we do the planning process. How do we go about putting in place an evaluation structure on the basis of which we will see whether we are going on the right direction or not. And yeah, so I mean, this is something which is, it says time's up. Okay, anyway, so it says that why should cities be sustainable? Because yes, we know that they are the largest consumers and the largest emitters, both in terms of energy, in terms of the amount of waste that it generates and all of those things. And then, of course, the emissions that it creates. And I feel that, you know, buildings is something which is very, very integral to the entire city process and what they do. So they use, I mean, this is something which is known to all of us, that 40% of the energy is consumed by buildings, 25% of water, and it's actually 40% of emissions globally are all emitted by buildings. And that is, I think, one of the keys that it is important to evaluate. And I, you know, use this tool to evaluate what you call how these buildings are performing right from the design stages to the time that they get operated. And nothing better than a tool like Griha, which is a tool or a rating program that we run in the country, which has been created for the conditions of India, for the way the aspirations are keeping in mind the aspirations of the people, and how we operate our buildings, keeping the climatic conditions, all of that. So we evaluate, and the underlying principles of this tool to evaluate the performance of these buildings is what gets measured gets managed, and and you know, on the same principles we are coming up with a tool for cities, so that we can evaluate the performance of these cities, so that, as I said, that you know, you would be able to evaluate them in terms of its livability. And those indices that have been created by the Government of India, I think are are key to the creation of this. So I think I would just like to leave it here, not take it further, and then probably we will address the question and answers or the discussions if there is time permits. Thank you very much.
Just quickly, before I go, we have a last speaker. Whenever we discuss about what we eat, we always look at the right-hand side of the menu rather than the left-hand side of the menu, which is like how much it costs. So I have Dr. Paritosh Gupta, not Dr. Paritosh Gupta, I will correct, I said, who is Executive Director of ILFS, and right now on deputation with the Kukuzad Project Development Company at Mauritius, and I'll let him speak, please.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, I'd like to thank Economic Times and Sangoban for inviting me here. And I'd like to go back a few years when Mr. O.P. Agarwal used to be my boss and Hitesh used to work with me. So I think he's paying back the Guru Dakshina today because one, he called me a doctor, so I think I'm already a PhD. And second, for promoting me in ILNFS because I'm still a Chief Executive Officer, he's made me an Executive Director. So Hitesh, thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure for being conferred those two titles today. I'm really sorry for not having a formal presentation because I realized I'm one of the last speakers and I don't think people would be interested in seeing too many presentations. And the best part of being the last speaker is no matter how innovative you are, I don't think the speakers leave anything for you to speak. So I'll take a different route to talk about my journey. I'm an economist by training, a management graduate by practice, worked with a financial institution for about 15 years where I specialized, and I was one of the youngest and one of the most micro venture capitalists in this country, looking at developing startups much before startups really became a household word. That was 1991 when SIDBI started a small 10 crore fund, and that grew into, which is today about a 5,000 crore fund. I was part of the journey till about 600 odd crores, investing in 95 companies directly, 700 companies through 24 funds which we invested in. From there, I realized that it's very good to sign checks, sit on board meetings, guide people. I think it's going to be even better to look at how you can be part of the process where you're part of the execution process. And I think I was in some presentations where I heard the chairman of ILNFS, the then managing director of ILNFS, Ravi Parthasarathy, talking about the private-public partnership model in creating the new infrastructure this country needed, and how a private sector could take on concession from government in running large infrastructure which would change people's lives. Last 15 years I have been with ILNFS, starting off with Rajasthan, and I think we have a Sarpanch from Rajasthan, and I spent a fair amount of my formative years in Jaipur. So I have looked at all aspects from financing to developing projects, and developing projects all across. We've talked about sustainability when we've tried renewing the 5 lakes in Rajasthan, which is 2 lakes in Udaipur, Ajmer, Mount Abu. We've looked at creating, I was part of JNURM 1 in 2005 when it started. I'm also part of the new Smart Cities program. I've worked across almost 25 of the 100 cities which have been approved by Government of India. We have formed a new joint venture with Government of Andhra Pradesh, where we are raising 5,000 crores for about 9 cities, and using very, very innovative instruments of getting private sector involved without burdening the state governments on their guarantees. And we are raising capital for projects as low as 8% on 15 years. And I think I'll come to that aspect of talking about financing, because I think financing is what I'm expected to talk on. Now my current role is in developing infrastructure projects in Africa, because this is, I think India talked about a lot of spending $10 billion in creating infrastructure in Africa, but I don't think we reached too far. So I think Government of India decided they need an organized platform to develop infrastructure projects, and 4 institutions got together, which is African Development Bank, Exim Bank, State Bank of India, and ILNFS. So we are trying to take best practices in India, look at how we meet the high fives aspirations of the African people. But at the end of this, what do we really require? We require private sector to get engaged more deeply with development initiatives. We require different structures and different financing instruments. And I've always believed in this, that India always had the money, has the money. There's huge amount of money chasing projects, but there are not enough well-developed projects. And I think that's the positioning in urban which is very valuable. And I'll just take, I think my clock is taking 20 seconds, and I don't know if I can do that. I played venture capital by in a lift explaining business plans in a minute, but I'll take some extra time, Hitesh. I think we have used a very, very innovative platform in 2 cities in Andhra Pradesh, and I think that will answer a lot of aspirational questions of where we want to move India. One city is a city called Elluru, and if there are some people from Andhra, they would know Elluru. It has a population of about 270,000 people. The other is Tirupati, which is one of the 100 smart cities. We have conceptualized and we have developed the entire city platform as an integrated project. So as Agarwal Sahab spoke about, we are not talking about transport, water supply, sewerage, sanitation, street lighting, solid waste management as different products, but as a convergence consortium approach of looking at all of them together, putting a layer of smartness through smart meters, through whatever. And we used a new instrument which existed, which is approved by Government of India, approved by Government of Andhra Pradesh, called Swiss Challenge. Then we reached out to some of the largest companies in the world, like Siemens, Hitachi, SL Infrastructure, and others, and said, why don't you create a consortium, Viatech, Warburg, talk about IT companies and others, and come to the government and give them a proposal of what you can do in this city, where you are not only investing, but you are part of the life cycle. You're going to run the city for the next 20 years. We created the framework from the government end. We've got 2 proposals on the table, which we'll now tender out to find what is the best. So we are feeling, you're following all procurement norms of what Government of India does, because we know regulations don't change and procurement is always a sensitive issue. I'm sure in the next 6 months we'll have solutions for both these cities. You'll have very large companies running these urban local bodies in very close consortium approach and working with the counterparties in the urban local bodies as they exist today, with the stakeholders, the councillors, the corporators, creating a framework where they are going to provide 20-year capital, raise their own money at the most competitive rates, and be accountable to the citizens of those cities in implementing projects, running those projects, and ensuring that the outcomes which were desired continue to be there and they are responsible for the next 20 years. Thank you so much.
We have to close down because of the strict instructions from the organizers. Unfortunately, we will not be having a panel discussion or a question-answer session, which we had envisaged earlier. I just want to point out quick 5 takeaways from this thing. One is, we talked about strengthening institutions of local governance. We talked about encouraging and sharing creative solutions and innovative practices. We talked about building inclusive partnerships and strengthening age and gender responsiveness. We talked about, very crucially, integrated and appropriate urban planning instruments. We also talked about monitoring and reporting mechanisms. And lastly, undercutting all of them, need for capacity building. I think these 5 or 6 are the key ingredients if we want our cities to work and sustain. Thank you very much. And I once again thank all the panelists, and I'm sorry that I had to rush you to close your presentation. Thank you very much. And thank you, audience, for everything.
Thank you to our panelists, and to present a token of our gratitude to them, I would like to invite here Mr. P. Padma Kumar, the Head HR, St. Gobain Flat Glass, and Head CSR, to kindly bestow the honor and gratitude to each of our presenters here, the speakers. So thank you to all our speakers. We have Mr. Hitesh Vaidya, the moderator, Mr. O.P. Agarwal, Dr. Chavi Rajawat, Mr. Sanjay Seth, Mr. Sanjay Prakash, Mr. Paritosh Gupta, and Mr. Padma Kumar of St. Gobain Flat Glass, presenting the mementos. We'll close with a group photograph, sir. Thank you. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of the conference. A long day, but yes, there is more to come. There's going to be words. But as we close the conference, I would like to invite here Mr. R. Subramanian, the Managing Director, Glass and Solutions, St. Gobain, India, to kindly propose a formal vote of thanks for the conference.
Good evening, friends. It's been a long day, and as we come to the last leg of the Smart Green Summit, the Smart Green Awards will be in the evening. It's my pleasure and privilege to thank all of you and all the speakers. You know, when we were putting together this summit, we wanted to put in the best of minds, get the best of minds, provide an overall structure for the dialogues to happen. So design, technology, material, and policy, and facilitate these conversations to happen, and hope that at the end of it, we get interesting perspectives which will emerge because of the coming together of these minds. And I think that has happened. That's happened very successfully. For us, this Smart Green Summit is all about smart minds and green sensibility. And I think we have seen a lot of that since the morning. I want to thank each of the presenters. We started in the morning with the design segment. Manit Rastogi and Chin To Chong were the people who were curating it. They also spoke further on it. There was Mr. Lim and Rahul Kadri, who gave us a lot of depth and perspective. Sometimes the perspectives were contrasting, sometimes they were aligning on design. Indeed, the entire discussion on design focused a lot on affordable housing, about the challenges of India, where resources doesn't seem to be the challenge, where there is a lot which can be done, a lot needs to be done. We heard what is happening in Singapore and what is happening in London. And we realized that there also the journey has not ended. It is very much a work in progress. And the challenge of really creating homes and not just housing, the challenge remains. And at the end of it, the real takeaway for me and for a lot of us in the audience was the necessity, as Rahul Kadri emphasized, of participation. How can we get more participation? How can we get the people who are involved, who are going to avail of the benefit of the affordable housing, co-invest in the entire thing? One round of applause to all the speakers. Thank you. We went from there to the technology segment, Rajan Govind and Professor Robin Drogenmüller. And then we had wonderful presentations from Pradeep Nair, Dr. Hussain Rezai Jorabi, and Guru Prasad Kopurao. We talked about how technology is providing wings to imagination. We talked about bringing in manufacturing approaches into the construction industry, about collaborating digitally and using infinite computing power. But at the end of it, we again came back to the importance of enabling human sensibilities to drive the entire thing. And for me, the biggest takeout was the point which Dr. Zorabi made at the end of his presentation, that we have to use technology, but use it so that we continue to respect the environment and bet on technology, because technology is the one thing which gives much more than it takes. I think that was a wonderful statement that he made. One round of applause to all the speakers in that segment. We had the material segment. We had Alain Moniz and Michael Foley speaking. And we had a long list of speakers and wonderful list that they made. We heard from Satish Gokhale about reusing, Gayatri Shetty about reimagining, Poonam Bir Kasturi having conversations. And really at the end of it, and Michael Foley said it's a very humbling presentation. I think he summed it up so beautifully. Tripti Doshi reminded us that poetry can come back into architecture. In fact, it is part of architecture. All over earth, starting from mud and ending in sky. Wonderful presentation. Yogesh and Ashish. Sure, please. One round of applause. Yogesh and Ashish spoke from DSP about designing with glass, and Ajay Gupta took us through a journey on lightweight construction. Great speakers, smart minds, wonderful session. One round of applause to all of them. Then the most recent, which was the policy segment, we had George Ferguson join us from Bristol. Hitesh Vaidya anchored it, and he was a wonderful anchor, pushing everybody along, so time conscious. Really, he played an excellent role. We had O.P. Agarwal, who started off by telling us that often the issue is sectoral thinking, and how can we overcome the sectoral thinking and take a holistic approach on this entire issue of policy. We had Dr. Chavi Rajawat, who came and firmly exhorted us first to say namaste back to her, and then took us on a journey of her village and the challenges that the village has. And she ended by saying, I invite you to participate in it. It's not just the urban areas where sustainability is an issue. Rural India has even bigger issue. Come, contribute. And I thought that was a wonderful presentation she made. Sanjay Prakash, who told us that programs are different from policy. He reminded us the session was on policy. and said that our path to development has to be different from that of the developed countries. Sanjay Seth brought back a little bit of optimism and said that no, hold on, we have got a nice rating system called Griha, and we are working on something about the City Livable Index. And Paritosh Gupta from ILFS brought back some more of the optimism and talked about the experiences that he had, and really the examples that he talked about gave us a lot of hope. And with that, the policy segment was a wonderful session for all of us. One round of applause to them. I want to thank the organizers and all the people who have made this entire day so successful. I want to thank also the MC. She was such a wonderful MC who took us along the entire journey today. And last but most certainly not least, I want to thank all of you, the wonderful audience who has been so enthusiastic and engaging throughout the day. One round of applause to yourself. And that pretty much is it. This is the third such forum that we are hosting. We want to continue doing this. We want this to be a continued journey. And we will do all we can from our side to carry on these conversations, carry on these debates, dialogues outside of this forum. I hope all of you will continue to participate and be engaged as much as you were today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Subramanian. And so precisely and concisely, he spelled out what is also the takeaway of this conference. Thanking you all, but yes, I have another job, still more. We've had lucky draw. We had it announced in the afternoon, just after lunch. Only 3 people have collected their vouchers. I'll just spell out the names of the others who've still to collect. That's a beautiful, it's for the spa. So I'm sure you're looking forward to that. Avnish Rathore from Gulshan Homes, Rohan Deore, then we have Sarat Jain, Neeraj Dar, Trupti has still not taken. Yeah, Glory Srivastava and Sagar Mundada. They are the ones who have still to collect. You can get in touch with the people at the console. And now for the feedback which you had filled, we've also taken 10 winners or 10 lucky winners from that. Ravi Kumar from L&T Realty. I hope he's here. Chandrasekhar Sinha from Sinha Associates. Amit Kumar from City Corporation. We have Rita Tayal, if I'm reading it right, from Wave Infratech. Tanuja Kujul from IILM CET. Vikas Mandan from Damascens Consortium. Shaurabh Diwan from SD Architects. Yogesh Kumar from Studio UNA. And we have Anugaha K from Foresight Architect. Bishru Sahu from 21st Century. So these are the winners who had from the feedback form. But thank you. These, of course, we have selected from the many feedback forms. In fact, most of you have filled the feedback form. We really value your feedback. And as was reflected by Mr. Subramanian, based on that, we are going to be working towards further improving and bringing in what you are wanting to be reflected here. So thank you for that, and thank you for being a part of it. We now I'm going to be requesting you to kindly move out, for we are going to be setting the stage for the next segment. That's the awards, the Gala Awards night which we have, the rewards and recognition.